All right, hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. I got the new internet set up. I teased it at the end of the show, but the video cables did not come. So hopefully we'll have a better picture next week. Although it's the Amazon timeline gives me from like Monday or like from Thursday till next Wednesday, I believe. So it's like a week-long gap for some reason. Must be some top secret cables that they have to go through the shipping and make sure that everything's up to snuff. But that's what we're waiting on to hopefully get a little bit better. It should at least help the lighting and Maddie B's picture here. So keep an eye out for that. Matt, you got anything for High Tempo this week?
Yeah, South Colorado is potentially going to fire Mike McIntyre at the end of this year. I don't know if you saw this story, but apparently at the end of the 2017 year, he signed a contract extension. And they're going to have to, if Colorado does end up firing him, they're going to end up having to pay a $10 million buyout. I think it's absolutely insane that he was good enough to be your coach. He brought you close to Pac-12 championship. They won their side of it. It was a year or two ago. And he got his contract extension, and now they're pushing him right out the door. So,
well, I'll say,
what are your thoughts?
There's some extra things on that. It was 2016, so it was 2 years ago, because that was the year that Michigan beat them, and they were both really close to the top rankings. I think going into the Ohio State game, Michigan was like 4 and Colorado was like 8 or something, and I could be way off, but I do know that was the year where they were trying to say would Colorado jump Michigan after the head-to-head. With that, there were some things that happened on Colorado's campus very similar, and I know we're going to talk about this later in the show, but since you brought up, very similar to the Zach Smith case at Ohio State, where I think one of his staffers was alleged domestic abuse. McIntyre covered it up. There were rumors, I think this was last year, last December. I don't think it was 2016. I think it was 2017 in December, and I could be off a year. But it was swept under the rug. Like, a lot of the media didn't cover it because Colorado isn't a big school. They're not a big basketball program. They're not a big football school. I think it was 2017 because they weren't as good. I mean, if they were a top 10 team, it would have been all over. But I don't think they were last year. So the rumors were that they could have fired him for a cause last year. For whatever reason, the AD, they sat down, figured things out. I don't know if the guy I would assume he's fired. But then they extended him, like you said. I believe it was that year. Or it might have been, I'm getting my years mixed up because, again, it's Colorado. Who gives a shit about them? But I will say that if he's fired now, look for some weird stuff to come out to see if they can get out of that buyout for cause. Kind of what, and our other guy, Bobby Petrino. I think this happened. Well, I think we rumored that a few weeks ago, that they were getting ready to fire him. But the big thing is the buyout. You have to get donors to pony up to buy out. I guess after you get blown out 5-8 weeks in a row, then you're like, okay, all right, we need to buy him out. And then they can pony up the money to do that. The funny thing was they had a pre-recorded Bobby Petrino coach's show, and they announced that he was fired during the tape or during the airing of that show. Did you see that picture?
Yeah.
I think I retweeted it on our account when someone else noticed it on the Louisville beat, but just hilarious that right now we're sitting where there's 2 weeks left and coaches are already going to be interviewed, if they're not interviewed already. There's 3 openings: Kansas, Louisville, and Colorado. I think the Colorado one, the way they made it sound was that it's effective, but he's going to coach through the rest of the year. I don't know how that helps recruiting or what, instead of doing an interim, but I've heard that one's set in stone. So maybe they had the donor pony up the buyout.
Now, unrelated, what side is Purdue in the Big Ten?
They're west.
Are they on Michigan's side?
No. They're on the west.
So they're
side.
they're on the crap side?
Yeah.
So then, question to you: does Braum leave Purdue to go back to his alma mater at Louisville?
I will say I've thought about this. You can look at it from 2 different ways. A lot of people said Harbaugh wasn't coming back from the NFL because he would leave the NFL when you can have decently losing years and still get paid and still get hired at other teams. But he came back because that draw was strong. Is that draw as strong for Brom? I don't know. Did they give him a shot? Harbaugh's roots went pretty deep because his dad had also coached there. I think Brom also has that same ties where his brothers or his dad, something else that would tie you deeper to your school. And he's just looking around the Big Ten itself. Pat Fitzgerald, he's a Northwestern alum. Look at what he's doing with Northwestern. They're in the championship. Then you have Paul Christ. He left Pitt. I know a lot of Pitt fans probably hate that I'm bringing him up. I know Jeff does. That he went back to Wisconsin, his alma mater. So are these really lateral moves? Louisville, I think, has a little bit more money. You could argue that their path is harder because they're in the division with Clemson and Florida State. So I think it really comes down to that. You're in the harder division. Right now in Purdue, I mean, you took out Ohio State, but you're not playing consistently. And at that point, are you going to be able to recruit the talent at Purdue, which it looks like he might have? 24/7, I had this as, and I can just use this as one of my high tempos here. 24/7 Sports reshuffled their top 100 players. Purdue had a guy that was committed. He was like the 11th best player in the country. They dropped him all the way to 70-something, 78th, I think. I sent you guys a screenshot. I'll put the tweet out because it has the previous number underneath so you can see where he was. And I can assume that the only reason they dropped him was because he committed to Purdue. So just so strange that it's still happening in the recruiting world. Even with all the high-tech stuff we have, every recruiting ranking is still who is on your offer list and who do you actually take visits to. Basically how they build that list. I mean, there's nothing. A couple of the Michigan guys dropped. One of them, the safety. Nick Saban had said that's the best looking safety that he's seen in college throughout his career, which he's been in college for 20 years. He was like top whatever. He dropped down to 10th. Like he was one of the top 5 players, I believe, and he dropped down because why he didn't go to Alabama. It just doesn't make sense. So early recruiting stuff, but keep an eye on that. Because it's hard to judge Brom based on that. Look at some of the playmakers he brought in. That guy that was dynamic, was it Moore, against Ohio State was a freshman. So if you have a dynamic playmaker like that can beat Ohio State, do you jump to Louisville where it looks like nothing is working? So I don't know if you make that jump, but my other high tempo, I want to congratulate you on a great season. Came up just a wee bit short in the playoffs. That second round, but you did get the playoff win in the first round, so congrats to you. Good luck going forward. I know you probably have
Thank you.
Ready for the next season to start already, probably. But anything you want to talk
about? Yeah, we came an extra point shy of tying it up. Had some good things, had some bad things. Definitely have a lot to build on. I know it's easy looking in the stands and watching and thinking, well, you should just do this or you should just do that. It's a lot different when you're the one that has to be the one to have the final say-so in matters. So definitely a lot of positives, and glad to see the way that the kids responded. And one of the big things that we talked about out on the ride home was the fact that throughout the course of this year, we had finished 7-5, but we were never blown out of any games. Like there was never a game where we absolutely got throttled. We were in every game, So that's something positive that I think to build on. That the kids were fighting, they were scrapping the entire year. They never gave up, and I'm proud of that.
Very good, and like I said, congratulations, and I know you'll have continued success in the future. Let's go ahead and jump into the Steel City update. Pirates, I didn't put them on here, but our old favorite GM, Neil Huntington, came out and said they asked him if he was going to be aggressive, and he gave the warning shot that I gave in the fall, whenever that was, trade deadline, when he traded for Archer. I said, wait, he's going to use this against Pittsburgh if this bombs. You know what he said in his presser? Yeah, we were aggressive last time. That's all he said. Leaving it up in the air, which makes me think that he's using that as his scapegoat. Like, look, we were aggressive last time and it didn't work out. Right now, I see the Pirates barely. I think the ceiling right now with the team, the way the roster is 85 wins. That's not good. That's not enough to get you in the playoffs. If that's a ceiling, that's not going to be good enough. You can go on a streak like you did this year, look like you're going to be a contender, and then fade down the stretch. So what I want to see is them go after some big name guys. Try to fill in some holes. Don't just go ahead and cut payroll. I hate the fact that baseball, and I don't even want them, because I thought about this after we talked last week about the average payroll. If they even did like a soft salary cap, I still don't think the Pirates would try to reach that level that you need to be competitive. Let's say whatever it was, 130 was the average. Let's say Major League Baseball was just like, hey, you know what? We're going to try to make this competitive and make the salary cap 150. Pirates right now are at 80. I guarantee they would be like, hey, can we stay at 80? And Major League Baseball would be like, yeah, why not? Go ahead, just stay right at 80. And I think that's just where they are. And whatever excuse they're going to make up, they're just going to make up. So until you turn things around, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. I know some Pirates fans really hate my takes on the show, but prove me wrong. Do something. Getting into hockey, the Penguins continuing their slide. They're 5-4-1 in the last couple games. I think did they win the last game? Yeah, they did. And they're still up in the goal differential. What I would like to see them do is set their lineups. And I know we talked about it. They were juggling some defensemen and who they play with. And I know it's still early, but they really need to start setting and trying to let some of these guys mesh. Because right now you're not getting a lot of consistency. And I think until you start to get like a Jack Johnson line set up, just give him a chance to breathe. I don't know what else they can do, but at this point, we just need consistency. Do you have anything to add on that, Matt?
As of right now, they're tied 2-2 with the Devils in the third, and I think that's a big part of it. When you have Letang, who's one of your better defensemen, and he spends more time trying to be aggressive in the offensive end, it doesn't bode well. I do agree with you that I think they need to find some consistency on that side of the puck, on that side of the ice.
Yeah, they just need to have defined roles, because you need to be able to trust the guy behind you. It's sort of like any defensive coordinator. You can bring in a new defensive coordinator in football, and he can throw whatever schemes out there, but the guys have to be comfortable enough to execute. There's always that talk like Steelers shouldn't leave the 3-4. And now they play all mixes of all kind of different defense, because it doesn't matter as long as the guys can trust the scheme, and that's what the Penguins need to do. Get their guys comfortable with what they're going to do, know that someone else has their back, and do it. If you have a defender that's going out, stretching the ice, trying to be aggressive on the offensive, if it works, it works, but you got to have the guys behind him that are ready to pick up that slack. And right now, I think defense is definitely the issue. So let's go ahead and get into football, because that's our big topic. Steelers. And I apologize. I missed a mailbag last week because we had a lot of things going on, and I was adding in the DJ Durkin stuff, and I missed it. But we're going to hit on that after, because I don't want to give the extra spotlight. Right now, the Steelers are second in the AFC. Did you know that, Matt? They're set up for a bye. That was a complete throttling of the Panthers. You know what that felt like? That was like me watching a Michigan game against Rutgers, which I watched on Saturday. I felt the same. I could finally just sit back and relax, and I knew the Steelers were going to win that game because they dominated. That Panthers defense, I thought, was supposed to be decent, if not good. With Luke Kuechly out there, they looked like, I don't even know, that was like a JV squad. That's my comparison. Michigan playing Rutgers was kind of the same thing. Steelers were just trying different things out, and right now they are clicking. I wouldn't want to play them. Patriots are on a slide. We had talked that was a key game all coming into the year. the Steelers have to play the Patriots yet again. Right now, I would definitely take the Steelers in that game. So I think it's not out of reach where they can seal up this bye. What are your thoughts?
Well, looking at them, what were the issues that they had? They had inconsistent line play. They had issues in the secondary and depth issues at linebacker. So you introduce more, you make some trades, you move some guys around, and it seems like now that they have some level of stability with their defensive backs, they flip-flop Watt around, and it seemed like that's helping him get more pressure. I think he's on the left side now instead of the right, so it just makes it easier for him to gain outside access when he's rushing the passer. He looks a lot better, and I think it even by flipping him around, it looked like Dupree on the other side was playing better than he has been. So I think like all around, they finally gotten to where they're making the adjustments that they need to make to be successful in the long term. And with Le'Veon Bell and his contract things, like I think it's like you can finally just breathe and just know what you're dealing with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that was the mailbag question we missed last week. Will Le'Veon distract the team? Will him being gone distract the team? I kind of shortened it up here. And everyone had thought that they were going to distract going into that Panthers game, which is why we missed this. It was a Thursday night game, and I just removed it from the docket. I forgot to bring it up. Everyone was talking about his contract going in. Is he going to sign? Is he not going to sign? Every time the players had an interview, they asked the question, what do you guys think about Le'Veon? Is he coming back? And people were like, we can only talk about people in the locker room. I think I saw Ben Roethlisberger say that at least 25 different times in different newspaper write-ups, different weeks, where it was the same exact question. He gave the same response. It's almost like the editor's like, hey, make sure you ask that Le'Veon Bell question. Got it, Chief. And Ben's just like saying the same thing over and over. It had to drive him nuts. But I will say one thing. Your defensive point, I think you're right with the TJ Watt thing. I think he moved to the same side his brother plays. And that could be a good strength. But whenever your offense is able to control the game, your defense, you're not going to have the depth issues that you're going to have if you're on the field for the whole game. And the Steelers are able to do that with James Conner. If you look at the stats right now, he's better than Le'Veon Bell. He's had less touches, and he has more yards, and I believe more touchdowns too. So if you're doing a one-on-one comparison, you don't need Bell to come back. And is he a distraction? I think at this point he was. And to be honest, I think this whole thing works out well for the Steelers because they learned that, hey, one guy is not bigger than the team. If we come together and play as a team, we're going to win the championship. And right now, they're sitting there. That's a little Bo Schembechler clip for you. They're sitting there, and they're going right into it. They're playing as a team right now. If you remember early in the season, Antonio Brown was doing a lot of me too stuff. Hey, look, I need the ball too. That's gone. If you noticed, he hasn't been doing that at all. And what's happening? Because he's looked and he saw, oh, shit, you know what? They don't even care about Le'Veon Bell because they're able to plug and play because we have one of the greatest quarterbacks in Steelers history, if not the greatest, playing right now. They don't need me. I mean, look how many other receivers we've talked about that they've plugged and played. If we're being honest, now we'll know what Bell is capable of when he leaves.
Well, even look at what Switzer's doing with like helping out in the return game and different stuff, cast off from the Cowboys and cast off from the Raiders. And
well, you knew that he was going to be a perfect fit here. We haven't had a dynamic guy like that since who? Hines Ward, Randall L days? Realistically.
Yeah. But, I mean, I think it's amazing that at this point, like, more NFL teams haven't taken that mindset of the late 90s Denver Broncos, where it went from Terrell Davis to blah, 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 to blah, 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 to blah, 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 to Charlie Brown off the street, that they're just grabbing random people, and they're like, here, just run this play. And, you know, they ran that outside zone so well that they were just getting mileage out of all kinds of people, and then they'd blow the knee out, and the next guy would come in and carry the ball for a while and get 1,000 yards and blow his knee out.
Until they got Maurice Claretted there in the mid 2000s when he skipped that draft or whatever, came in overweight. I think they drafted him in the 5th round or something. But yeah, you're right. They plugged and played, and I think it's not even that. We listed all of James Conner's deficiencies. He's worked to improve them. He's modeled his game after Bell. He sees what works in the offense. You just got to be a little bit patient. The holes will open up because they have to respect the passing game. And if you don't, then Ben will beat you deep. It's the defense that had worried me. And get the guys reps. I know we have some young guys out there. Get them reps. Get them up to game speed. And if Ben can keep them on the sideline so they're able to learn more and more throughout the season, it's only going to help come playoff time. The rest of the AFC is a mess. Besides the Chiefs.
Here's one of the other things that I think it's Vance McDonald. He's playing a huge role this year. He's kind of filled that void that the combination between him and Jesse James are filling that void from when Heath Miller retired. Because you have your outside burners. I mean, back in the earlier days when it was Ward and Plexico Burris or Santonio Holmes, they had the deep threats over the top where the secondary was having to respect the deep throws. And Heath Miller was always making a lot of catches and had a lot of production. It's like now that they have Juju again and they have Brown out there, they have the speed on the outside that they can allow. It opens things up for the tight end so Ben can focus on those underneath throws. I think that's really what's making the offense hum a lot better.
Well, you said it exactly. I don't think a lot of defenses are ready for the 2 tight end sets. Steelers are one of the only teams that will throw 2 guys at you with McDonald and Jesse James. And what was it, the Tampa Bay game where McDonald ran that guy over down the sideline with the big stiff arm? Yeah. So he's able to make plays and get yards after the catch, which is huge because you can't have your linebackers creeping up if you can hit a tight end on a pop pass or a quick out or something right behind him, which Ben does a lot going back to Heath Miller days. So you don't have to have a wide receiver that's big enough to go over the middle if you have tight ends that start there. But anything else you want to add on the Steelers?
Not so much of the Steelers. I definitely think, though, down the pike there, I think they're in a good spot. And I think this solidifies now that they can, this distraction of is Bell playing, is he not playing, what's he going to do, this, that, or the other. I think they can finally put it all to bed and just focus on playing. And I think you're going to see Pittsburgh play even better.
I think definitely. Right now, like I said, they're behind the Chiefs and the AFC. So if we go down the AFC, the Patriots just got throttled by the Titans. The Titans looked like world beaters, and to be honest, they're not even a good team. So you're looking at a Patriots team that could be reeling. And I really don't know what their issue was. Because the defense is usually so stout under Belichick that he can switch it to play a little bit bend, don't break. And they were definitely breaking in that game. I think, 34 points or something like that? I don't know what the final ended up being. But you're looking at that, and I just wonder, is this a year that it's open for the Steelers in the AFC? What do you think?
I don't know that I would go that far. I think New England is showing some signs of breaking, but I think you also have to take into consideration that there's a lot of Belichick products that are not out. And I mean, Vrabel played and coached with them, so I think they kind of know what to expect from New England, and they understand what it takes to beat them. So it was shocking that they were able to pull it off, but I think they kind of had a strong idea of what the adjustments were going to be because of the working relationship that Vrabel had knowing the organization.
What do you think about the Chiefs? Do you think they're for real?
I think they are. Yeah, and this is why. I think when you look at what Mahomes did and being able to sit behind Alex Smith and learn the playbook, and we've kind of talked about this on the show before, but one of the models that I really liked was Ben was never forced. He didn't have to be a day one starter. There are very few quarterbacks, it seems like, in the NFL that you can throw them into the fire right off the bat, and they lead productive careers. The guys like one of the ones that really stands out to me was Steve McNair. That when he signed his rookie contract with the Titans, he had to sit behind, I believe it was Cody Carlson, or it was someone that like he shouldn't have been the starter, but they were like he needs to learn how to be a quarterback and learn the things in the film room and the playbook and why things are the way they are. And as he got adjusted to the game, he hit that point with his salary that it was like, okay, he's now at a point where we got to figure out is he going to be worth the next round of contracts? Plug him. He played well and just kept it like the rest of the way. Even Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Aaron Rodgers got to sit for how many years behind Brett Favre, and I think that paid off. Watching Brett Favre, listening to how he was thinking of things. I think like having a good role model going in, or someone that you can watch and kind of see good, bad, and ugly how things are going, can lead to a positive transition.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit torn on them because they look so good early, but Mahomes, there's not a lot of tape on him yet. I mean, I guess there is now going into week 11, but you're going to have to see how teams adjust to him in the playoffs. Remember, Peyton Manning was a regular season hero for how many years? Where they would come out, destroy teams, and you're thinking, they're going to run through the playoffs first round, he's bounced. So, show me it. Plus, he also has Andy Reid. He's a known choker.
Well, with Kansas City, though, the thing that they have to worry about is keeping healthy on the defensive side of the ball, because the offense is going to score a pile of points. The answer that you need to find is your defense going to be able to come up with the stops when they have to? And with New England, I think they can win a shootout with them. With Pittsburgh, it's a toss up depending on which Steelers team shows up. Could potentially win a shootout with them. I mean, I think the possibilities are there. It's not a clear-cut domination like we've seen in years past.
Yeah, I think the AFC is wide open. I think the Steelers have as good a chance. If we go into, actually, hold on, before I forget, I almost forgot to mention it. John Harbaugh, one of the Harbaugh boys, is rumored to be out at the end of the season for the Ravens. He signed the one-year deal that had said that he needed to improve or whatever, and it would be just a kind of like an amicable split where he would step back. He's stuck with Joe Flacco, and I don't know if he's really letting Lamar Jackson learn under him, but at this point, they're on such a slide. They've lost 3 in a row. They're sitting at 4-5, that I think he's out. So what do you think? Who will hire him? Because I don't know. I'm looking through the team list. You have teams at the bottom, possibly the Bills and the Jets. Would he want to go there? Don't know. Raiders have Gruden, so they're kind of stuck. He could end up in Denver with the Broncos. They're on a slide, but I don't know if they would make a change. Browns are the Browns. I don't know if he would go there, unless he was trying to stick it to the Ravens.
I mean, he might just, if both sides are mutually parting, he may just fade out. Or dare you join his brother in Michigan?
That would be awesome.
I'm sure there'd be some kind of special assistant position where he collects a check, doesn't have to do much.
You mean the Alabama coach's rehab, where Rich Rod was just cited last week? You go down there, you become an analyst. Who else is joining that squad? Rich Rod was down there. Who else is getting fired? All kind of guys. Probably Petrino. He'll be down there doing the offensive stuff before their playoff game, getting ready. The SEC Championship game. I'll be surprised if Petrino was down there already. Then in the NFC, we have the Jaguars.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
You missed the band. Since you were saying about the AFC, how about the good old Bungles?
They're not going to fire. Did they fire Marvin Lewis yet?
No.
Are they ever going to fire him?
They're not. But
Exactly.
Marvin Lewis he's taken over defensive coordinator. He fired his defensive coordinator, said he's going to call the defense, and then I don't know if you saw this, but the special assistant to the head coach in Cincinnati is now Hugh Jackson. He's now the Dwight Schrute of the Cincinnati Bengals.
I don't even need to know that. I didn't see that, and I thought you would be one of the ones down in Nick Saban's camp because look how it worked out for Sarkisian. So I don't know. I don't think he would go. Would he go to the Bengals? I mean, it depends on if it's an amicable split with the Ravens, I don't see him going in the division. I also glossed over you have the Colts. That's where everyone rumors Jim to go every year. So why not John go there? I know he didn't play for them like Jim did, but they have Andrew Luck. I'm sure they've hung out if he's as close with the Harbaughs as what everyone NFL insider thinks he is. Then, I mean, if he's sticking around, I doubt he would go the NFC. I doubt he would go to the Niners just because of how they handled Jim. The Giants, Cowboys, maybe the Lions. The Lions could be a middle team here, and I've heard some rumors already from the Michigan camp because he's close to his brother. His dad lives there. All but his Detroit family's just right there.
Patricia. Patricia's got at least 2 more years.
Does he though? They're 3-6. And if John Harbaugh came open, you wouldn't make that switch?
I don't know enough about what Patricia can do as a head coach. I mean, he's a Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator.
Yeah, but John Harbaugh's a Super Bowl winning head coach, and that's what you need.
Interesting point. Fair point. But multi-winner with New England.
How many coordinator wins do you need to get equal 1 head coach win? Then we'll have to do the math. We have to figure it out.
Well, then you're going to have to do it because I'm not doing math tonight. No, but I mean, if you're Detroit though, and you thought he was the guy, do you really want to consistent look at the teams? And we've said before, you look at your Bengals, you look at your Lions, you look at these teams that every 3 or 4 years they're making coaching changes, they're firing personnel, they're new GMs, there's new this, new that. The thing that makes this work is consistency and continuity. When you look at your winning organizations, your New Englands, your Pittsburghs, they're not making a lot of changes. They're not going crazy with front office. I mean, even though they're a little bit of a mess right now, even Dallas to a certain extent. They haven't had the recent success, but there's consistency there. It's crazy with Garrett and Jerry Jones and whatever that dynamic is, but it's consistent.
Best friends.
There's something
that dynamic is.
There's something to be said.
I to be honest, you could have made it the point that if they would have kept Tony Romo 1 more year, they could have a Super Bowl. That Zeke Elliott year where he busted out. Imagine if they had a veteran quarterback. We'll never know. So consistency could be a thing. And that's the point. A lot of the teams that I'm naming here that are at the bottom of the division are always at the bottom of the division. The Lions, the 49ers. And at one point, if you had a chance to jump on a Super Bowl winning quarterback that's been at the Ravens consistently for how long, do you not try to sign him to a Gruden 10-year deal if you're the Lions? Why not at this point? I mean, this coordinator doesn't look like it's working out. Get a proven winner. Say, look, we're signing you a 10-year deal like John Gruden. Who do you want? Blank check. We're going to show the fans that we're at least going to try to win. And then, I mean, Gruden's definitely tanking. I don't think Lions have to tank. I don't know what they're doing this year. I thought they would end up 3-6. I didn't think in that division because look at what happened with the Bears. I mean, did the Bears ever actually tank? I mean, I know they have some bad years. They made that trade up, so they've had a high draft pick, but they're 6-3. They're in the driver's seat, and their defense is destroying teams. Lions worst defense in their division. So, I don't know. NFC is going to be down to, right now, it's looking like the Rams and the Saints. You could say possibly the Bears and the Redskins, but I don't think the quarterbacks have enough. Like, I think Alex Smith is still a game manager. I don't think he has enough to beat the Rams, or he can't outgun the Saints. Same with Mitch Trubisky. He might have awesome weeks, but then he also has complete meltdown weeks where he's getting 4 fantasy points. So what do you do with that? In the playoffs, that's not going to fly. So anything else you want to add for the NFL?
I just think when you look at the NFC, one of those teams that could fly under the radar is the Vikings.
We've been waiting for them all year.
With having Kirk Cousins, they have a consistent ground game. I know they had the.
I thought you were just going to start. Go ahead.
Game manager. They got that game manager that take the pressure off your defense and pound the rock and get yourself to a Super Bowl and finally win one.
I just don't know. I thought Kirk Cousins was going to be better there. He should be getting outgunned by Mitch Trubisky. Let's be honest. Mitch wasn't the best quarterback. I panned him coming into the league. And now look what's happening. He's turned the Bears into a formidable opponent when that should have been the Vikings. That was everyone's prediction, was the Vikings in that division. And besides the weird people that are probably on Allstate's or State Farm's payroll, well, who's the one that does all the Aaron Rodgers commercials? The same 5 ESPN analysts that bring up Aaron Rodgers every week about how he's the greatest. No. If you're betting on Aaron Rodgers at this point in time, you're just a fool. You're getting taken to the cleaners. He's not getting it done. Don't know how to break it to you. That was also mentioned too for a hardball destination, because Aaron Rodgers and who's their coach, Mike McCarthy, they're obviously not on the same terms. So would you make that jump and say, hey, look, we're sticking with Aaron Rodgers. He got it done that one time. Let's bring in John Harbaugh and see if that can be a nice power dynamic there. Never know.
Is John Harbaugh more offensive focused or defensive focused?
Matt, we don't know.
Because I really don't even know what he does. Like, he's the head coach, but like he's quieter than Mike Tomlin. Like, he's just kind of there.
He's like the CEO. I want to say that he was a defensive coach like his dad, because his dad, before he coached at Western Kentucky and brought in Willie Taggart, he was like the defensive backs coach at Michigan? And then he was doing defensive stuff, so he came up on the defensive side. And I want to say John did the same. I think Jim was the only one that was opposite because he was the quarterback. I could be wrong, but I want to say he might have won a Super Bowl as a coordinator, since we were talking about that. And was he with, maybe he went there. Let's look him up. I want to say maybe Eagles?
Because like, it's almost like he's tainted, because he was coaching the team that had Ray Lewis as the linebacker. So like with what Ray Lewis did as far as the motivation and everything for the team, it was almost like it didn't matter who was there. Papa could have been there, and Ray Lewis was just going to take over with what the defense was doing. They were going to run that consistent scheme, and they were going to be willed to be good.
Yeah, this says he was with the Eagles from 98 to 2007, so he didn't win that Super Bowl. They lost. But he was there with McNabb. He was the special teams coordinator and defensive backs coach. It looks like he was defensive backs before Indiana, special teams at Cincinnati, Morehead State, special teams in secondary. He was actually at Pittsburgh. I would assume this is Pitt Panthers, as a tight ends coach. And then the very first job he had was Western Michigan, coaching outside linebackers and running backs. So predominantly defensive-minded is what I would think, and special teams, which seems to be, used to be staples of the Ravens, not so much anymore. So could he bring in, come to Green Bay, be the CEO type coach, and tell Aaron Rodgers, who do you want to work with as your offensive coordinator, and bring him in? Basically, that's exactly what the Broncos did with Peyton Manning.
Bring in Todd Haley, proven winner.
He's available. They probably get him for dirt cheap.
Unless Saban signed him.
I don't know. He just got to get out of that rehab. I heard it's really nice. It's $200 million football facility that they have down there. Hanging out, you can hang out with all kind of NFL coaches. They bring ex-NFL players in to work out with the team, because that's cool. So, basically like a minor league right there in, what's that, Tuscaloosa?
Yeah.
All right, let's use that to transition into college football. We got the big one. The ACC, one side is set. Clemson, and I'll be honest, the Boston College game could have been close. But you're telling me that their quarterback getting hurt, the Clemson guy didn't jump and put his full body weight right on that guy? And I'll say it. I don't know if he could have stopped, but he definitely bounced on that guy twice before. I don't know if it was ever. I've never looked into it, but I don't think the game ever said if it was a shoulder injury, could have been a broken collarbone, could have been a broken rib. I don't know. But I don't know which defensive lineman it is because they have so many huge guys. But he clearly put the full pressure on that guy's chest. And I know that's the exact penalty that the NFL was trying to avoid, that I've been critical of. But in that case, that basically sealed the deal for Clemson. Boston College was in that game in the beginning. You can't win it with your backup quarterback. He made some poor throws. And to be honest, it was a cold night. I don't know how much game experience that other guy had. But when your starting quarterback goes out on a D lineman, basically just laying on him, flattening him, I could see the point that they're trying to make. They didn't flag it, so I don't think it's a penalty in the NCAA. I don't know really what he could have done, but it did look like he could have at least rolled off him after the first hit, but he went full out on that guy. I don't know if you saw that play. But it swung the game. Clemson wins the ACC. Is it the Atlantic? I'm trying to learn these divisions. I swear I am, because I've been so poor at the past couple weeks. But Pitt takes it to Virginia Tech, and I don't think Virginia Tech could have stopped them at all. Pitt could have had 70 points in that game. It was almost like a joke. Pitt was like, we talked about running power and being able to control the game. They were able to do that and basically run the score up. It was almost like watching them play, like who they play like in the preseason. It was almost like a game against Youngstown State or some other like warm-up team that Pitt usually plays that you're like, hey, this could be the year. Look how dominant their run game looks. And then they get into the ACC or the Big East back in the day, and you're like, oh, okay, they're just not bigger than that team. Now they're getting destroyed. So, but Virginia Tech, once a proud defense, bombed out. Did you get to watch any? I know you had your own game, got rained out, so it was pushed back. So I don't know if you even got to watch any college football this week.
I actually, sadly, I ended up going back and watching some of the replay of the Pitt game. Where the hell did that team come from?
I just laughed because you know what is setting up. You warned me pre-show because I told Matt I'm going to be 100% pro Pitt, and he said, calm down. People are going to get mad because you're going to jinx them. And Wake Forest right now, they just beat NC State on a Thursday night game, so they have a few extra days of rest. Pitt has to win one game. They're going to Wake Forest, then they're going to Miami. If I was Narduzzi, I wouldn't even try to get a flight back to Pittsburgh. I would say, you know what? What the hell? We're so close. We can't risk blowing it. We're going to go to Wake Forest, and we're going to go down, call up IMG Academy. We're going to stay there the whole week, get our guys on remote classroom stuff, and we're going to go and just be in Miami so that it's not like we're traveling back and forth up and down the East Coast, getting worn out for that Miami game, because Miami looks beatable. They could drop the Wake Forest game just because it's a weird matchup for them. The pro style versus Wake still runs like some of that spread stuff, but you never know. Wake does have their radio guy give the playbook to the other team, unless that's just a Petrino special. But you have Pitt right there. It's so close that you know it just never works out for them. Never does. So what do you think?
I want to root for Pitt, but in only the way that Pitt can do it. They only have to win one game. Every scenario that will play out so that Pitt does not get to go to the ACC Championship is going to happen.
Well, they also can rely on Virginia losing. Now, Virginia plays Virginia Tech last week. I actually don't know who they got this week. Is it Georgia Tech, maybe? So you're playing two teams that are easily beatable, especially if that Virginia Tech team, I know it's a rivalry game, but if that's a team that shows up, the one that Pitt just throttled, Pitt's going to have to win a game. Do they beat their old buddies Miami? Remember how they knocked off number 2? Was it number 2 Miami last year? They knocked them off?
Yeah, knocked them out.
So it's hilarious. They could have the reverse happen, where Miami knocks Pitt out of the championship game. And let's be honest, if Pitt gets in there, Clemson's ranked number 2. Guess what team always plays great against teams ranked number 2? Pitt. Did it against Notre Dame. Was it Notre Dame number 2 this year? Did it against Notre Dame. Beat Miami last year. 2 years ago, beat both Penn State and Clemson. Narduzzi can get those boys fired up. If I'm Clemson, I'm cheering for anybody else. Is it just Virginia and Pitt? I think it probably is that are left in the contention. You got to be cheering for Virginia if you're Clemson. You got to be at this point.
Yeah. Well, and I think the one thing that I've noticed out of Pitt more so recently, number one, they've gotten a little bit away from that same power read where they run the shuffle pass underneath to the tight end. I think they overplayed that hand, and it was getting borderline predictable, so people were teeing off on it. And they've kind of gone back to some of the misdirection stuff that made them successful versus Penn State, where they're motioning one way and then bringing counters back the other way and using their play action. It's good stuff. I like it. I just think there's always something that's just inconsistent with Pitt, whether it be turnovers, whether it be the defense giving up a gazillion yards. There's always like something that just, for no reason other than it's Pitt, and they'll just take random plays off and quarters off.
It's strange. They got killed by UCF, and they got killed by, was it Penn State? They got killed by someone else this year too. They lost to UNC, which unforgivable. UNC is so garbage that Pitt should have won that game, and Pitt should have already clinched this division, if we're being honest. So if Pitt loses out these last 2, they can point at that game because UNC is so bad. There's no way they should have lost to them. They should already have this locked up. But they played on the road, and this is what we're talking about. On the road, teams are totally different. Pitt has to go on the road for both of these games. That's what I'm nervous about, to be honest. So, I don't know. They have to know it's close. Players have to know it's close. Clemson has to be thinking about it. It has to be in their players' minds. Now, do they come out and do a revenge tour thing like Michigan's trying to do? Call teams out, say they're on a revenge tour, and helps them focus and get ready for payback? Could work against Pitt. I don't know. It's going to be one of those things. I will say this, though. You're always high on UCF. If Pitt were to upset Clemson, and I'm a voter, I don't think there's any way you could put Clemson in over an undefeated UCF at that point. And I know it's way, way early for that, but if UCF stays undefeated and they beat the ACC Championship team by like 40 or 50 points, how do you not say, hey, let's give them a legitimate chance in this playoffs? I mean, because there could be other things that happen. Washington State, Michigan, Ohio State, I don't know if either of them, I mean, they could always lose the championship game. If either of them could get to 2 losses.
Washington State bumped themselves up to 8, so they're within striking distance. But I think what ends up happening is Clemson loses to Pitt. That opens the door that it doesn't matter. Georgia and Alabama are in. If they win, if they're remotely within striking distance, those 2 will be in. Notre Dame wins out, there are 3. And then if Michigan wins out, that would be your 4th team, is the way that would play out.
Well, I'll say this. and maybe you're on to something, and we can kind of get into. I'll switch topics here to the Big Ten before we get in. I guess we could just go right to the college playoffs. Real quick for the Big Ten, was Northwestern clinches, and I did want to bring this up before we get into the playoff stuff. They had an alum write an article for the New York Times, which I think is still the largest paper in the United States, on how he would feel better if Northwestern went back to losing, because losing teams would have a lesser chance of getting concussions with CTE. Basically, no scientific evidence shows that if you're on a losing team, you have less chance of getting CTE, but this is the kind of article that the New York Times is printing? Give me a break. What kind of misinformation do you want? As a Northwestern alum, I get it. He threw some jabs in there about chanting at other teams that will be your bosses one day or something like that. Okay, we get it, Northwestern. You guys sucked for how many years? And you're supposed to be an academics first school. This kind of goes ahead and goes against that shift, because when academics are under fire these days for the high costs and high student loans, your athletes are finally in a spot. You're an alum, and you're, instead of writing an article like, yeah, I get to go watch Northwestern play in Indianapolis for a Big Ten championship, you decide to write an article on how you wish they were losing. It's that kind of me generation. Like, how is it affecting me? Oh, I have to feel bad because our guy could get a concussion playing in this extra game. Like, give me a break. Disgusting that I saw that. And now it just makes me want Northwestern to lose even if they play Ohio State. Because you have those two scenarios, Michigan and Ohio State. Unless Ohio State loses to Maryland this week, and I think I got confirmed word that Maryland's starting quarterback is out for the year. So they're going to have to play their second string. And again, going back to their training stuff, all that heavy training, have all these quarterbacks with knee and leg injuries. Were they overworked going into the season? I know they had the coaching regime change. Do you really think the training stuff shifted after they fired one guy, brought Durkin back, half fired him? I mean, I just feel bad for the athletes that are going there if you're overworked and you're constantly getting hurt. But we'll see. I don't think they're going to get it done. Michigan hasn't lost to Indiana at home since like 1967, I believe. So I would be completely shocked if Indiana won. I know there's some mad weather, which I think plays into Michigan's hand. They'll just run the ball. Indiana's more of a spread team. They need good weather to move the ball. They have taken Michigan to overtime. Was it twice with Harbaugh or just once? I know they went, was it last year they went to overtime and almost beat them? But I think both those games where they were close were at Indiana. So I think it comes down to those two teams, and we can shift into the playoff talk now. It was you brought up the point. They moved with Washington State ahead of Ohio State. That was the team that they jumped to get into 8th. Were they setting it up so that if Washington State wins out and Ohio State wins out, are they setting it up so that they can keep Ohio State out? Because if you're comparing losses for them, two one-loss teams in that scenario, Washington's loss was to USC by like a couple points and a questionable non-call on a roughing the passer that would have got them a first down at like the 25-yard line with a minute to go, I believe, where Washington State could have won that game. They didn't call it. The sack stood. Or no, it wasn't a sack. I think it was just it pinned them back, or was a fourth down or something. They didn't call it, and it ended the game, basically. Purdue laid a whooping on Ohio State. So if you're comparing losses, you got to say Washington State has the better loss. Do you think that that would hold?
Interesting take. I don't know. I think it could set us up. I think it's too early to tell that, because with the championship games, with Michigan and Ohio State still having to play, I think there's too many things that need to work itself out before I would say yay or nay to that. Because I think kind of the way the playoff committee does with it, and just kind of kick the can and hope that over the next couple weeks that the games sort themselves out, and then there's less of an argument. The only thing that I really, and you kind of hit the nail on the head, I still think as long as UCF continues to win, I think they deserve a shot. Not, I mean, that's what March Madness is built on, is those random upset games that you don't expect to see happening. And I think with the way that UCF is efficiently moving the ball, I think they could compete with some of these other schools.
Well, you have a point with them, and I did bring them up, and I don't think we've ever mentioned this before, but the way the old BCS was written was that it was always the highest, what are they called, G5 or whatever, the General 5 conference schools, or Notre Dame. And so the biggest thorn in their side right now is Notre Dame. So I don't think, could they keep Clemson out? Let's say Clemson does lose to Pitt, that scenario I laid out earlier. Does that put UCF in? Probably not. If you have one loss Michigan or Ohio State, one loss Washington State, or one loss Oklahoma as the other three teams. Because Notre Dame plays Syracuse, and then they play USC. USC has looked awful, and I have to think that Clay Helton's one of the next coaches to get fired. I never thought he was a good fit there. I don't think they have the X's and O's. I just think back to the Rose Bowl with Penn State, where everyone was just throwing jump balls and just trying to out-athlete the other team. Penn State relied heavily on Saquon Barkley, and they were just like, we don't have a game plan for this. We're going to out-talent you. But when you're losing to teams that are not talented, you've lost at USC because you should be able to run that conference. And then come up against who? Oregon or someone from the North, maybe Stanford, and right now Washington State. That should be the championship game. Should have been a rematch between USC and Washington State if the results would have stood in the North. And so I think he's out. I don't think his only chance of saving his job is to beat Notre Dame. I just don't see Notre Dame losing. So if you're comparing that same criteria, and it might not be written for the College Football Playoff Committee, but I guarantee they're looking at it right now, and they're saying, we have 4 spots. There's no way we can leave 3 conferences out. And right now, like you're saying, Georgia and Alabama's getting in. The only way I think that has a chance is if Georgia wins. Georgia has to give Alabama the one loss. Because if Alabama beats Georgia, they're done. They would have 2 losses at that point. And right now, the way things are shaking up is you're going to have 3 or 4 teams that are left that are either undefeated or have 1 loss. Actually, 5 teams. Georgia's going to fall behind all 5 of them.
But a close loss, they could put them at 5. That would set the table for them to jump back in the mix.
But that's the last week, though. If they jumped them to 5 and they lost, you still have to jump those teams. Like they would have to. The only way that would work is if Georgia somehow climbed to 3, and so you would need Michigan to win or Michigan to lose. So they jumped ahead them, and you would need either Clemson or Notre Dame to lose, or both, to get Georgia up to that 2 or 3 seed. Let's say Michigan loses to Ohio State. If Georgia's even sitting at 4, and then they're followed by Oklahoma that has 1 loss, Washington State that has 1 loss, and Ohio State that has 1 loss, Georgia loses, and one of those 1-loss teams is going to win, and they're going to jump them back up. So I think the only way that scenario works that a lot of these SEC homers are trying to push is if Alabama loses that game. And then you have the other can of worms, how far do they fall? And if Notre Dame's there, do you really think that they're going to have three conferences left out? Because how much is it going to take for the Big Ten and the Pac-12 to say, you know what, we tried it for 20 years. Was it 20 years since they did this Bull Coalition thing? We're taking our ball and going home. You left us out a couple times in a row. We don't care. Like it's all for whatever ratings. And then they go back to just doing the Rose Bowl. Is that what the committee's... that was the most lucrative bowl. And then you go back to the old system where you're naming the Rose Bowl champ or the other team as national champs, and you still don't have a system. So I think if that comes down to it, you'll see them expand. But I think right now the unfortunate part for UCF is that they have one huge Notre Dame team. Second most wins.
I tell you, you know what? Actually, I take my comments back about UCF. This is what I want them to do: win out, get left out, win your bowl game, and then claim another national championship. Just be a dick about it. Just have a parade, get rings, claim your national championship. You're undefeated. You weren't invited, but you know what? You were undefeated. You can claim it, and you just take what's yours. And eventually, like if you pound on the table hard enough, you'll get a seat. Because the people like Alabama are furious about it.
It's
Because
not
they
just
didn't make
them.
it.
It is not just them. Georgia fans,
It's the
Auburn fans, everyone's mad about it down there.
Yeah. So I just say just do it that way. Just win out. Just keep winning your games. You know you're not going to get a seat at the table, even though you deserve it. So win out, and then you'll have 2 full years of undefeated seasons, which is something that even Alabama couldn't do, and just claim another national championship.
Oh, I 100% agree. And I've had this argument, well, I guess not even argument. I've had this analysis with you that I think any team in history that's undefeated should claim a national championship, because they always throw that lineup from Michigan that's like, hey, they've only have like 1 or 2 AP national championships, but they also have all these other coaches pull ones and all this other stuff. But the AP tries to like write them down, and they're like, well, the 1997 one was still split, even though that was an AP one. And I think if you're undefeated, claim them. I think someone wrote it up there that Alabama claims 16 national championships, even though they don't qualify for whatever. Michigan, in the NCAA's eyes, they can claim up to 17, I think. A bunch of them were undefeated seasons. Go back and claim them. And I think if you were undefeated at any point in history, claim them. People make fun of Pitt. They went undefeated. Claim it. Why not? Some of these smaller schools, do you really think Washington State is going to have a fair shake? Because they are not. 1994 Penn State, claim it. Why the hell not at this point? How do you know Nebraska would beat them? Nebraska has looked like shit in the Big Ten. You can't tell me, you could say that, oh, that was a different team. That was a different team. You don't know that. Maybe Nebraska could never have competed in the Big Ten. We don't know. Claim them. I think they should claim them all. And like you said, I want to get to 16 teams where every conference champion is included. I got into a debate. I don't know if it was where I was on Twitter or something. I got into a debate with a guy that was saying, well, if you go with automatic championship games, what happens to the Michigan-Ohio State game? If, let's say, Ohio State loses last week and Michigan has clinched, do you think Harbaugh would rest his starters to get ready for Northwestern? And I would say, number one, definitely not, because of all the shit he gets for not beating Ohio State. Maybe, and this would be very, very rare. Let's say if Ohio State or back in the Rich Rod days when Michigan was like 3-7 or whatever going into that game, could Ohio State have rested their starters? Possibly. But at that point, do you really want to risk having a recruiting hit like that? Those games are usually the biggest recruiting weekends, and that's going to be your tune-up game. It's not so much like the NFL where you have weeks and weeks to prepare, where you can rest guys and then you have other paid guys to back them up. Or you have one-star quarterback. Usually in college, like Ohio State won the national championship a few years ago with their third-string quarterback. Would it have mattered? Was it J.T. Barrett that year? I believe Michigan hurt him in the game. If he doesn't play in the game, let's say they rest J.T. Barrett that game, does Ohio State win the national championship? I don't think they do, because I don't think they had no film on Cardell Jones. They had absolutely none. And he played like a man possessed because they didn't know what he was going to do. Run it, make a poor throw, didn't matter. He's barreled teams down. So I don't think that would matter. What are your takes on that? Do you think if we went to an automatic bid that some of the teams would rest players?
They might rest players. I mean, I think we talk on here about the game within the game. If you know that you already have a seat at the table, it doesn't help your odds putting your best guys out there and getting them hurt. I mean, looking at some of the guys that are worried about their draft stock in the bowl games. If you know you have a chance for playing in a national championship, you're probably not going to. And with the expanded rules now, for redshirting, maybe that's an opportunity to use some of those guys that you want to see what they can do. So you play some of those freshmen or different people that you're not going to burn their red shirt, and you can test them out to see how they're going to play or what they're going to do. And, maybe you get some different looks that way. And I think maybe that helps you in some aspects because you can see there's no substitute for live rounds. And being able to put people out there and seeing on national TV in front of a crowded stadium, what do you do? Or do you rise to the occasion and play well, or do you kind of suck and fade to background? The only way a lot of times you can get a true feel is being out there and taking the live fire.
Yeah, and I will say, let's say this year, if people are making this distinction, what if they're looking at a team like Northwestern that doesn't have, or that's going to have just a puncher's chance against either Ohio State or Michigan? Are they going to risk resting their starters knowing that they don't have depth and then having them be rusty for a week? A lot of teams in college, you have trouble coming off bye weeks because these are kids. They're not paid athletes where you have a $1 million backup that's been on the team in that same system for 30 years, like Charlie Batch, that can come in and win you a game. You have a freshman guy that could be literally shitting his pants on the sideline and playing in front of 100,000 people in the big house, and you think he's going to come in and be like, yeah, I'll win this game. I just don't think it's going to be a big of deal because you have the recruiting aspect. And those games are such heavy on recruits. They're not going to have a recruit come and be like, hey, yeah, come watch us play. We're just going to hang out, though, because we already clinched. You're going to lose that atmosphere, and then you're going to have a trade-off with what? I mean, SEC already has these bye weeks built in with, I was wrong, it's not Mercer, it's Citadel this week for Alabama. Citadel. Georgia, I don't know who they're playing, but it's some other cream cake. Before then they play Georgia Tech. Could they rest starters? Yeah. How do you know they're not going to do that already? I mean, what's the point? Michigan kind of did it versus Rutgers. You get a couple scores. It's close, whatever. You play till halftime. Play very, very vanilla. And then you know that you're just going to manhandle them in the second half, so you put all your backups in. I mean, it's still happening. So go to an automatic bid. That's my solution. And then even if not, you still have to win to get that automatic bid. So you're still going to have to play hard. And if you lose that game, wouldn't you rather be sitting there, like I said, Clemson versus Pitt, where Clemson might have one loss, and in this expanded playoff, they could still be an at-large bid? By resting their starters and picking up a loss against South Carolina, then they have 2 losses. It doesn't make sense. So there's still going to be other mind games unless you're like a complete lock like Alabama. But even them, why risk your well-oiled machine to mess around with players and give them a week off, have them lose focus? They're still college kids. Go to an automatic bid system. It works for whatever the D2 round or FCS. If it can work for them kids and they're playing how many more games, it could work for the big schools. Don't give me that extra concussion stuff. So... anything else you want to add? College football playoffs. I didn't even look at the rankings today. We're supposed to go through it.
I think we covered it well.
Yeah, I'll try to bring them up and go through it here before the end of the show. But like I said, I'm going to be working on. I did have a teaser that I was going to put out this week, but we're still waiting to get approval. So I'm waiting on that, and hopefully that comes out soon, and then we'll be able to share some exciting new stuff that we've been working on. And the college football, right now, I believe it's out. The top 10 stayed put. So they didn't move anyone. And I wonder if Washington State moving up was just the AP voters kind of just picking and choosing whatever the college football playoff was. Because I think they had them. The college football playoffs had Ohio State behind Washington State. So I bet there's a bunch of voters that just don't watch the games or have biases in their rankings. The one guy from Georgia wrote an article this week. He had Georgia ahead of Michigan, and he had Michigan pretty far down the list. And his article said something like, yeah, I grew up in Ohio, so there's one thing that I cheer against, and that's Michigan. And then you put that in an article, bro, and then you have them voted the lowest of any AP voter. It makes it look like your rankings are a joke. And he's a first-year voter, so I think if you're going to be that biased, you're out. And there's one other guy, Jim Alexander, and the reason I noticed him is he's the only guy that had Ohio State ranked third, I believe, or fourth. He has Ohio State in the playoffs right now. After their loss to Purdue, he didn't drop them at all. I don't think his rankings have changed since that blowout. He's just like, you know what? They lost. Who cares?
Maybe he just left it as is. He was just mad. He was like, yeah, just keep it as is.
For the next 5 weeks, he's like, same one. Who cares if they win or lose? That's my playoff ranking right there. So some of these ones, it's almost like a joke. So, yeah, if you're following along, Alabama 1, Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, Georgia's still 5. And like I said, Georgia would have to jump into that 3 or 4 range because if they lose to Alabama in the championship game, they're bound to fall. LSU fell all the way to 7 after they lost to Alabama. If it's closer, I still think they would drop. LSU ended up dropping, 4 or 5 spots? Georgia would still drop 2 or 3, even if it's close. Even if they only dropped 1 at that point, they would still be left out. They still have LSU, though, ahead of Washington State, which I find odd. But I think Washington State, a win over Washington in the Apple Cup, puts them squarely in the top 6. And then, how many of those bowl games or championship games are going to be awful? ACC is going to have an awful opponent for Clemson. Big Ten's, in speaking terms, Northwestern is going to be awful for whatever team's in there. And then the Pac-12. The Pac-12 South, we don't even know who that division champ's going to be. And it's going to be an awful team. SEC is the only one that has a top-tier opponent already set. And the Big 12 is most likely, I think it's going to be a rematch. I think Oklahoma and West Virginia played that last week, and then they'll have to play again. And I really think, due to the nature of that championship game, it's going to be a split. So, I think they'll each win 1. What are your thoughts on the Big 12?
I don't know. They're just out there playing by themselves, I think, at this point. I think they're kind of left themselves out in the dark because of the teams that shoot themselves in the foot. I think with the way that the Big 12 does their conference championship, I think it hurts them the most because they just take the top 2 and let them duke it out again, which is a very Big 12-like because they're appreciative of the Wild West. So why not just knock yourself out? And unless you have someone who's just clearly out the superior team, like what Oklahoma was last year, you're going to end up just knocking yourself right out of the race and being left out in the cold. They don't have that clout that the SEC schools have, and it is what it is for them. They'll turn out a good bowl record, I think, because of playing the style of offenses that they do. But I think that'll be it. It'll just be a footnote.
Yeah, I think the one team that has clout is Texas, and every year they're ranked up high. When they start to lose, they hang around. Even though they lose to Maryland, they're still hanging around until they finally just go down. I don't even know where they're at now. They're at 15th. So they're right around Penn State range, same record. So I don't know. I think what hurts them is they gave into pressure to make that championship game, and I don't think they had to do that. But I think they had to be a little bit more patient. Because this year, you have West Virginia, Oklahoma at the last game of the year. Those could be 2 one-loss teams up against each other. The winner is basically like you're playing a conference championship game to put you right there. And you're the conference champion, so that should give you the heads up over Notre Dame if they were to drop 1. And then you just wait for other champions to lose. Simple as that. Oklahoma's already 6. In that scenario, they wouldn't pick up another loss. Would they really get jumped from Washington State? I don't know. They would most likely jump Georgia if they lose to be 5. Then they just need one other team to lose. But now you have to win twice and hope that other team loses. So I think you're right, Matt. They're shooting themselves in the foot. But any final things for the final bell this week you got?
Just the only thing that I really had for the final bell was just Glad that I was able to pull off that big 138-83 victory in fantasy football against you. my battered Falcons.
Matt, my team is so hot or cold. I'm on the Mitch Trubisky roller coaster here. Either he does awesome, which he did this week, and then none of my guys show up, or he does poorly and the rest of my guys show up and I lose. So I just can't have a consistent team. I went different this year. I went for gunslingers, and when we're hot, we're awesome. We had like a 3-week stretch where had like the highest scoring team in the league, and then we're down to nothing. So I'm just fighting to make the playoffs and hoping that we have another 3-game streak, because my defense is set with the Seahawks. They play the 49ers, I think, twice in our league's playoffs. Strategic. Always go against the 49ers, who are 1 and whatever. I had that planned out for a while. So my guys are ready for a playoff run. We just got to get there. Just got to get there, baby. So my final thing is Karis LeVert, basketball player previously at the University of Michigan, playing for the Nets, definitely could have been in the running for an all-star. He was almost averaging 20 points a game. Came down with almost a Gordon Hayward, Paul George type injury, where it looked like he had broke his ankle. But results came back today, so I just want to give a shout-out to him, that no broken bones, basically a miracle. If you watch the video, I'm not going to put it on Twitter because I see people liking the video, and then I don't think people realize that if you like it and retweet it, that it shows up on other people's feeds, and they might not want to see a graphic injury. But they said that it just dislocated his ankle, and all of his ligaments are moderately damaged, but nothing tore. Another miracle. So he just has to kind of rebuild that up. And they made it sound like he could play at the end of the year. So definitely, bro, don't give up. Keep working hard because you're having a great season. I love to see it by former Wolverines out there getting work done. That's the third time he was injured twice at Michigan. So I always hate to see it because I think he was one of the guys that, you know how you're in college, you get recruited a little bit lower because they think you're only 6'5", and then you hit that growth spurt. I think he grew too fast, had some foot injuries because he shot up to like 6'7" or 6'8", and it took him a while to finally grow into his body, and he was lights out this year for the Nets. Hit a game winner the other night, so I just wanted to end on a shout out to him. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back at you next week. Steelers are going to continue to roll, and Pitt will probably lock up that championship this week, so we'll see.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a new scandal at Ohio State, so stay tuned.
I know we didn't even have time to get into that, but Ohio State, just keep the scandal going until after the Michigan game so we can win that one. That's all I'm hoping. Thank you, Brett McMurphy. And thank you, fans, for listening. We will see you next week.